Alright, so I started the sketch, started with the head, because it's like an easy way to check proportions. Then I realized that the drawing was too big, so I adjusted it. Also divided the image in thirds, so I can take measurements and proportions from one part to another. So yeah, I'm copying from a photo. I'm looking at the photo constantly, and also because this is not an exact one-for-one replica, I'm also trying to keep the things related and proportional within my own drawing. So yeah, I started drawing all the features and trying to keep in mind the anatomy. So I drew the rib cage and the kneecap, any anchor point that I can find. Here I drew the hip bone. I moved to color first to try to paint on top of the sketch with some basic skin tones, local colors, but I didn't like it. It was very hard for me to go straight to the skin tones without having a reference of the values of the light and shadow. So I scrapped it and went back to grayscale and started refining the sketch, painting on top of it with this basic round brush with grayscale. So I try to look at every feature and shade accordingly to related to the anatomy and the shapes of the muscles and the bones, and try to break it down into shapes. So there's an easy way to shadow, like considering the arm as a cylinder, so I shade it like that. I'm also using the photo as a reference constantly, so I can paint the shadows and the anatomy properly. Here the face is really hard because it's upside down, so it's kind of hard to draw it the proportions correctly. So I'm just adjusting the nose and the cheek and the brow to make it more proportional. Here I aim the hair, so I try to shade it like go from dark to light and then dark again and then light again as it touches the ground. I flip the image to check for mistakes. When you see it on a mirror, you can see mistakes really easy. So I try to paint the darker shadows and the darker areas where the skin tone change, the dark pinks and dark browns. So I try not to go too much to the dark values or the very bright values, even though the photo had a very bright studio light. As you see on her chest, there's like a very, very bright white light. And so yeah, I'm just refining the sketch and the correct values for the features, the proportions, trying to follow the image and also my own drawing. So I try to keep in mind that when I add color later, I have to try to keep it on the mid-tones, so the shadows and the lights don't get too either desaturated or too dark related to the rest of the image. So here I add another layer using the skin tones from the swatches. I'm going back and forth between grayscale and color, checking some values that are either too bright or too dark, mostly too dark. So yeah, I try to add some riches to the shadows, add more saturation, so it doesn't look like wood. the skin is more like orange and dark red instead of brown. So I try to paint the background in a desaturated green, but it's way too saturated, so I added a bit of saturation on top of it. Here I refining the shapes of the chair, so I can see exactly where her cheeks are resting and her arched back. So I put a layer on top of everything in normal mode, so I can paint any correction on top of everything. This is what I'm doing at this point. I'm picking colors and refining the shapes and the anatomy. Here I'm adding some more color in the overlay mode, but then I will move to the normal mode and I'll just richer lights and richer shadows, because when you use overlay usually it goes like really desaturated. Adding the ear that was previously like covered by the hair, adding some more highlights here and there, and just try to follow the photo and the anatomy. Here I'm refining the muscles of the back and the leg, because it was like very undefined, so less like a indent on the curvature of the back. Here I'm refining the rib cage that was a bit small previously. It's like a very difficult area, the rib cage and the abdomen, because they are very subtle shadows and lights, and if you go way too dark or way too bright, you make her look like very skinny or very very muscular. So you have to try to keep it on the mid-tones with very subtle variations. Here I'm adding some reds and some pinks to make it richer skin tones. You find the other toe that was in the shadows. Yeah, pretty much I'm just constantly looking at the reference, but also correcting the image on its own proportions and relationships. Here I noticed that the rib cage was a bit small. Also the abdomen has like this very wavy shapes here and there. It's kind of hard. Yeah, at this point it's just refining the minor details, adding some loose hairs, and that's that. So thank you for watching. This was like a very fun study. Took me 3 hours, and yeah, it's fun to do this every once in a while.